Hello friends, about 70% of the friends who watch my videos are not subscribed, and I would be very happy if you did. Also, don't forget to press the like button and leave your comments. Your interaction makes the content reach everyone and contributes to the growth of the channel. Thank you all. From which country or city do you follow the channel? I'm not the kind of guy who believes in ghosts. Honestly. I used to laugh at those YouTube videos I saw a spirit night shift at a haunted cemetery or heard knocking at 3 a.m. I'm a practical man. I only believe in what I can see. That was before I took this job. Night security, it sounded simple enough. But when I saw the location listed on the contract, I froze. Hart Island. If you've never heard of it, I don't blame you. No tourist map marks it. It's a small, windswept island off the Bronx, locked down for decades. No residents, no transport. Just tall grass, crumbling buildings, and mass graves deep enough to unsettle your soul. They say over 1 million unnamed souls are buried here. Prisoners, plague victims, stillborn infants, the homeless, the forgotten. They also say, once you step foot on the island, you're never quite the same. When I signed the contract, the supervisor told me one thing. The job's easy, kid. Just follow the rules. If you can't, then don't come. Back then I thought he was joking. I didn't know those rules weren't meant to protect the island from the living. They were meant to keep something else from rising beneath it. I got the job through an anonymous email. No company logo, no interview, no resume required. Just a subject line that read, "Night guard needed. High pay. Must tolerate silence." I'd been unemployed for over 3 months. Bills piling up, rent overdue, credit cards maxed out. At that point, I didn't have the luxury of choice. The first meeting took place on a Friday evening at an old forgotten pier on the eastern edge of the Bronx. The person who contacted me never showed up in person. Instead, I found an old flip phone and a handwritten note on the bench. If you still want the job, get on the boat at 8:47 p.m. Not earlier, not later. I almost walked away. But as the sun disappeared and the air grew colder, I stayed. An old wooden boat arrived without a sound. The man steering it wore a long black raincoat face hidden beneath his hood. He didn't speak, just gestured for me to get in. When I asked, "Where are we going?" he simply replied, "Hart Island. Tonight." The boat drifted silently through thick fog. No GPS, no light, only waves. And after a while, I noticed something chilling. There was no sound of an engine. It was as if we were gliding, pulled by something unseen. When we docked, Hart Island appeared like a faded black and white photo. Dry grass, crumbling red brick buildings, and a faint line of smoke rising in the distance like someone or something was still active here. A small guardhouse stood lit by a single dim bulb. I stepped inside. On the desk, a stack of old files, a handheld radio, a flashlight, and a sealed envelope. The envelope had just one handwritten word: rules. As I was reaching for the envelope, a man appeared behind me like he had stepped out of the shadows. He wore a faded, torn security uniform, bloodstains dried on his shoulder. No greeting, no smile. He looked straight into my eyes and said, "You can still walk away. Once you read the rules, you belong to this place." I blinked and asked, "Who are you?" But when I turned around, he was gone. No footsteps, no trace. The envelope marked "Rules" was sealed with a wax stamp, deep red, cracked with age. I hesitated, half expecting it to crumble in my hand. When I finally peeled it open, inside was a single sheet of paper, yellowed and brittle. At the top, written in shaky ink, "To be followed every night without exception." This is not a formality, it is survival. The first rule hit me like a cold slap. 1. At exactly 11:00 p.m., stand facing the western burial rows and read aloud the 13 names listed for that night. The list will appear on your desk. Do not skip. Do not hesitate. Do not mispronounce. That night at precisely 10:59 p.m., the radio on my desk crackled and spat out static, then fell dead silent. I looked down, and there it was, a sheet of paper that hadn't been there before. Fresh, clean, with 13 names printed in faded typewriter font. None of the names meant anything to me. No tombstones bore them, no markers, just long lines of grass-covered soil stretching into the fog. Still, I stepped outside, flashlight shaking slightly in my hand. The wind had picked up, but only where I stood, like the island was breathing right beneath my boots. At 11:00 p.m., I stood before the Western Rose as instructed. I read the first name, Martha Keene. The air around me pulsed like something old had stirred. The second name, Joseph D. Carrington. A sound behind me. Not a footstep, not exactly. More like soil shifting. I turned, nothing. By the 7th name, I was sweating despite the cold. The 11th name, I heard a whisper repeated behind me, soft and garbled, as if someone buried was saying it along with me. At the 13th name, Harold Finch. Everything stopped. The air, the sound, even the wind. Then the radio in my pocket crackled back to life as if exhaling in relief. On the second night, I made a mistake. Halfway through the list, a sudden loud gust knocked the paper out of my hand. It vanished into the dark. In the panic, I skipped one name, didn't realize it, until I got back inside. Then I heard it. The wind chimes outside the guardhouse started ringing violently, even though there was no wind at all. The lights flickered. The reflection in the window wasn't mimicking my movements anymore. It was standing still, watching me. That night, I dreamed of a man with no eyes crawling from a shallow grave, mouth open as if screaming. But all I heard was my own name echoing. From that night on, things changed. My flashlight began to dim only when I reached the burial rose. The list arrived earlier and earlier once it was already on my pillow when I woke up. And the worst, I began to recognize the names. On the 5th night, the list included the name Eleanor M. Brighton. That was my grandmother's name. She died peacefully years ago. But as I read her name aloud, I heard her voice behind me, trembling and weak, saying, "I'm cold, darling. It's so cold down here." One night, the list had only 12 names. I thought maybe it was an error. I read all 12 aloud anyway, nervously glancing at the dark grass swaying like waves in the moonlight. Then the wind chimes didn't ring. Instead, the ground began to tremble. Soft at first, then stronger. I looked back at the list and saw the 13th name slowly writing itself in blood-red ink at the bottom of the page. Redacted, the one who forgets. I never skipped again. The envelope marked Rules was sealed with a wax stamp, deep red, cracked with age. I hesitated, half expecting it to crumble in my hand. When I finally peeled it open, inside was a single sheet of paper, yellowed and brittle. At the top, written in shaky ink, to be followed every night without exception. This is not a formality, it is survival. The first rule hit me like a cold slap. 1. At exactly 11:00 p.m., stand facing the Western burial rose and read aloud the 13 names listed for that night. The list will appear on your desk. Do not skip. Do not hesitate. Do not mispronounce. That night at precisely 10:59 p.m., the radio on my desk crackled and spat out static, then fell dead silent. I looked down, and there it was, a sheet of paper that hadn't been there before. Fresh, clean, with 13 names printed in faded typewriter font. None of the names meant anything to me. No tombstones bore them. No markers. Just long lines of grass-covered soil stretching into the fog. Still, I stepped outside, flashlight shaking slightly in my hand. The wind had picked up, but only where I stood, like the island was breathing right beneath my boots. At 11:00 p.m., I stood before the Western Rose as instructed. I read the first name, Martha Keene. The air around me pulsed like something old had stirred. The second name, Joseph D. Carrington. A sound behind me. Not a footstep, not exactly. More like soil shifting. I turned, nothing. By the 7th name, I was sweating despite the cold. The 11th name, I heard a whisper repeat it behind me, soft and garbled as if someone buried was saying it along with me. At the 13th name, Harold Finch. Everything stopped. The air, the sound, even the wind. Then the radio in my pocket crackled back to life as if exhaling in relief. On the second night, I made a mistake. Halfway through the list, a sudden loud gust knocked the paper out of my hand. It vanished into the dark. In the panic, I skipped one name, didn't realize it, until I got back inside. Then I heard it. The wind chimes outside the guardhouse started ringing violently, even though there was no wind at all. The lights flickered. The reflection in the window wasn't mimicking my movements anymore. It was standing still, watching me. That night, I dreamed of a man with no eyes crawling from a shallow grave, mouth open as if screaming. But all I heard was my own name echoing. From that night on, things changed. My flashlight began to dim only when I reached the burial rows. The list arrived earlier and earlier once it was already on my pillow when I woke up. And the worst, I began to recognize the names. On the 5th night, the list included the name Eleanor M. Brighton. That was my grandmother's name. She died peacefully years ago. But as I read her name aloud, I heard her voice behind me, trembling and weak, saying, "I'm cold, darling. It's so cold down here." One night the list had only 12 names. I thought maybe it was an error. I read all 12 aloud anyway, nervously glancing at the dark grass swaying like waves in the moonlight. Then the wind chimes didn't ring. Instead, the ground began to tremble, soft at first, then stronger. I looked back at the list and saw the 13th name slowly writing itself in blood-red ink at the bottom of the page. Redacted. The one who forgets. I never skipped again. By my 3rd night on Hart Island, I had already come to terms with things that would have driven anyone else to madness. The whispers in the wind. The names that shouldn't be remembered. The sensation of eyes watching me from beneath the soil. But nothing prepared me for the sound that would return every single night after that. It was 2:46 a.m. I had just returned from the burial rows after reciting the night's names. I was logging the report, routine things, meaningless boxes to tick. My flashlight sat next to me, casting a long shadow against the wall. The radio was silent. The island dead still. Then, knock. 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 3 slow, deliberate taps echoed from the back of the guardhouse. I froze. There shouldn't be anyone else here. I grabbed my flashlight and crept toward the sound. My breath caught in my throat when I realized where the knocking had come from: the steel-reinforced door to the old morgue. It had been sealed shut with rusted chains. I had seen it on my first night. The door was welded closed. No one could be inside. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the wind. Maybe something fell. But the next night, same time. Same number of knocks. Same door. 2:47 a.m. Knock, knock, knock. Each knock sounded like a fist hitting the metal from inside. I pressed my ear against the cold steel. Nothing. But when I stepped away, I saw it. 3 faint handprints, right where my head had been. I reported the sound in the logbook. The next morning, the page had been torn out. In its place was a sticky note. I didn't write, "Do not respond. Do not acknowledge. It is not knocking to come in, it's knocking to be remembered." That night, I tried ignoring it. I played loud music, read out loud, counted backward. Still. Knock. 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 2:47 a.m. Every single night. This time it was louder. And the floor beneath me shuddered. By the 7th night, I had enough. I went to the door again, flashlight trembling in my hand. The metal was ice cold. My breath fogged up around me, even though the temperature had been warm moments ago. I leaned in, and then a whisper. Soft, dry, like leaves rustling in a crypt. "You forgot me." Again. I stumbled back. The flashlight blinked out, and from the cracks beneath the door, a trickle of blood began seeping out, thin, steady, warm. On the 10th night, I sat huddled in the corner, refusing to go near that damn door. 3:47 a.m. came. I held my breath. Nothing. I sighed, thinking maybe it was finally over. Then knock, knock, knock. Not from the morgue. From the inside of the guardhouse door. The door I had locked, the one right behind me. I turned slowly. There were no shadows, no footsteps, but the door handle was moving on its own. That's when I realized I was no longer alone in here. The knocks didn't stop. The shadows didn't leave. But it was the silence in between that began to unravel me. On the 4th night, the radio started acting up, and what it broadcasted wasn't from any frequency I knew. It was around 1:12 a.m. I was sitting at the desk trying to log another meaningless report just to keep my hands busy. The radio on the shelf behind me, standard issue government brand, suddenly came alive with a burst of static. Nothing unusual, Radios sometimes do that. But this static wasn't empty. It had weight. It felt wet. I turned to adjust the dial, and then I heard it, a low, almost imperceptible sobbing. Not one voice, dozens, maybe hundreds, all crying at once, layered over each other like voices trapped in fog. The sobs weren't panicked. They were defeated, like the kind of crying you do when you know no one is coming. At first it was just weeping. Then the voices began to say things, broken phrases overlapping in whispers. You forgot us. Still cold. No one said our names. The dirt. It never ends. The radio's volume dial turned by itself up slowly until the sound filled the guardhouse. I tried to shut it off. It didn't have batteries. It wasn't even plugged in. The temperature dropped rapidly from 68 degrees to 42 degrees in under a minute. My breath came out in fog. The windows began to frost at the edges. Outside, nothing moved. But inside, the crying grew louder, more desperate. I dropped to the floor, hands over my ears, heart pounding. The sound pressed against my chest like the weight of a coffin lid. And then, just when I thought I'd scream, silence. Everything stopped. I staggered up to the desk to write it all down, but the page was already filled. Not in my handwriting. Written in red ink. You missed a name. He is not resting. I flipped back through the previous lists. I had read all 13 names, I was sure. Then, I saw it on the third night's list. Name number 9 had been crossed out in thin red lines. A name I didn't remember reading at all. That night, I unplugged the radio. I placed it outside the guardhouse. But even without it, I still heard them. In the wind. In the pipes. From under the floorboards. Low sobbing. Then names. Then my name. He hears us now. He lives above our bones. Let us in. The final thing I remember before blacking out that night was the sound of 100 fists pounding on the earth all at once. After the radio incident, I started sleeping less. Eating less. But Hart Island didn't seem to mind. The island had its own rhythm, its own silence. And lately, it felt like it was watching me wait. I thought I'd already seen the worst it had to offer. I was wrong. It was around 3:30 a.m. The air had gone completely still. No wind, no sounds, like the entire island had hit pause. I stepped out for one last patrol around the storage sheds near the western fence line. That area always gave me a bad feeling. It was like the fog lingered longer there, thicker and colder than anywhere else. As I turned the corner behind the last shed, I saw them, wet footprints, bare, human, leading away from the water's edge. They were fresh, glistening in my flashlight beam. But the ground was bone dry. The tide hadn't risen in hours, and it hadn't rained since I arrived on this godforsaken island. I know I shouldn't have. But curiosity, or fear, or something in between pushed me forward. The prints led toward the main chapel ruins, an old red brick skeleton of a building long abandoned. They moved slowly, step by step, like someone had dragged themselves across the dirt. And the strangest part, the wind had picked up, but it was blowing against the direction of the prints. No sand, no leaves, no fog disturbed them. They were too clean, too deliberate, like the island wanted me to see them. As I approached the chapel, the footprints stopped abruptly, right at the stone steps leading up to the crumbling archway. And there, on the wall inside, was a wet handprint, smack in the middle of the brick, still dripping. I raised my flashlight, and in that moment I saw a shadow move across the inside wall. Not mine, not cast by any light source. It slid like oil across the surface, and then vanished. My body locked up. I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just a ghost story anymore. It was tracking me. Suddenly the wind snapped back hard, howling through the trees like it had been waiting for a cue. Dust whipped through the air. Leaves spiraled up from the ground. And then I heard it. Not a scream. Not a whisper. But the wet squelch of bare feet stepping in mud right behind me. I spun around. Nothing. But a new footprint had appeared, inches behind my heel, still wet, still glistening. I ran. Didn't care about protocol. Didn't care about rules. I sprinted back to the guardhouse, locked the door, barricaded it with the desk. I sat in the corner, flashlight pointed at the door, radio in my lap, shaking. Then, I heard one step. Just one. A single wet footprint, pressed firmly against the concrete right outside the window, facing inward. By now, Hart Island had become more than just a place I worked. It was in my bones, in my dreams, in my breath. It watched me the way a deep forest watches a lost traveler, silent, but very much aware. I started avoiding certain places, certain shadows. But the island didn't like to be ignored. And one night, it made sure I saw what I wasn't supposed to. It started with the Northfield surveillance camera. Around 3:10 a.m., the feed went dark, just static and flickers. When I rewound the footage, I caught something strange. Just before the blackout, the camera shook slightly, then adjusted its focus toward the far northeast corner of the field, a sunken section of land near one of the older mass graves. No one should have been near it. Not even me. And yet, just before the screen went dead, I saw something. 2 faint glimmering dots of white light at the edge of the pit, like eyes, reflecting. The next night, I took the long way around the field out of morbid curiosity or sheer stupidity, I don't know. That corner of the island was colder, deader than the rest. No grass, just packed earth and a shallow depression in the ground. I'd never seen that pit before. And I had walked this island more than enough. It wasn't wide, maybe 8 feet across, but deep enough to swallow someone whole. And at the bottom, something moved. I crouched at the edge, shining my flashlight down. At first, nothing. Just shadows dancing over dirt and bone. But then, 2 eyes opened. No eyelids. Just pale, milky orbs in a face half buried in mud. The face didn't blink, didn't flinch. It stared up at me like it had been waiting. For how long? Seconds passed like centuries. Then the mouth moved. Not open, not closed. It grinned. I tried to back away, but I couldn't move. My legs were like concrete, my body frozen under the weight of that gaze. Then I heard it from the pit. Not aloud, not with ears. Inside my skull, a voice. You said my name wrong. You never finished the list. My knees buckled. I fell backward, scraping my hands on the rough ground. When I looked again, the pit was empty. No eyes, no face. Nothing but dry dirt and silence. Since that night, I haven't seen the pit again. But I know it didn't go away. Every time I close my eyes, I see them staring from behind the lids. Not blinking, not moving, just watching. Sometimes when I'm walking past the burial rows, I hear the soil shift like something adjusting its position underground. And on the 7th night, when I looked in the guardhouse mirror, the eyes weren't mine anymore. They were his. I don't remember falling asleep that night. All I know is I woke up at the desk. My flashlight was still on, though dim and flickering. The radio was silent for the first time in days. No whispers, no sobbing. For a moment I thought maybe it was over, but then I saw the envelope. It was on the desk, right where I usually set the names list. Thick yellowed paper, no postage, no markings. Just my name handwritten in trembling black ink. To me, I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper. The ink was smudged, water-stained, but I recognized the handwriting. It was mine. If you're reading this, then you've already stayed too long. You think this is a job. It's not. This place doesn't hire guards. It keeps them. You've seen the signs. You've broken the rules. You've felt them watching. They can't leave the island. But neither can you. You think you're still alive. You're not. My hands were shaking. I turned the paper over. On the back, scribbled hastily, was a final line. Don't forget to write the letter. I checked the desk clock. It blinked 12 suro over and over, refusing to change. So I grabbed my phone. The date said March 13th, 2087. That can't be right. I had only been here for a week. I checked the calendar pinned above the desk. The days were crossed out, not just 1 week's worth, but years. Decades. And then I saw my own handwriting scrawled into the margins of the wall. Next to it, I was the last one. Now you are. The radio buzzed back to life, but no voices, no static. This time it played a recording, an old grainy video feed like a security log. I saw the outside of the guardhouse dimly lit, and in the video I saw myself, wearing the same clothes, same flashlight, same radio. Only, I wasn't moving. I was standing outside staring into the window, but I was inside. I stood up from my chair, horrified, turned toward the window. No one. When I looked back at the monitor, the video was still playing. But this time, the other me was waving, smiling. I grabbed my flashlight and ran outside, sprinting through the fields, past the chapel, the storage sheds. I just wanted to find the boat, the pier, anything. But no matter where I went, the island looped back on itself. North led to south, east led to west. It was like space was folding, and in every direction I looked, the sky was locked in an endless pre-dawn gray. And that's when I saw it. A new grave, freshly dug. The wooden marker read one word, guard. I collapsed beside the grave. Tears, fear, exhaustion. Then a hand touched my shoulder. I looked up. It was me, but older, thinner, worn, eyes hollowed out like a man who had watched centuries pass. He looked down and whispered, "You'll get used to it. The island just needs someone to talk to." I tried to scream. He walked away, fading into the fog. When I returned to the guardhouse there, it was a new envelope on the desk, blank, waiting for me to write. And now, I sit here, pen in hand. If you're hearing this, reading this, then maybe you've already taken the job. Just one rule, friend. Don't forget to write the letter. If you found this story valuable and interesting, please hit the like button. This really helps us bring you more good and valuable content. Leave a comment below and let us know what you think, what questions you have, or what topics you would like us to cover next. We love hearing from you. Of course, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our next stories. Thank you for taking the time to read my stories.